สวัสดีค่ะขอต้อนรับเข้าสู่การอบรมครูผู้สอนภาษาอังกฤษซึ่งจัดโดยมูลนิธิการศึกษาทางไกลผ่านดาวเทียมร่วมกับสถานทูตสหรัฐอเมริกาประจำประเทศไทยสำหรับในวันนี้เป็นตอนที่2ของชุดที่ชื่อว่า Unlocking Learners' Voices ซึ่งจะเน้นการสอนทักษะการเขียนและการพูดWelcome you all to the Teacher Training Videoconferencing Program organized by the Distance Learning Foundation, the U.S. Embassy Relo Office, and TOT Public Company Limited. Today is the second session on spoken persuasion under the series called Unlocking Learners' Voices, and our guest speaker is Dr. Marty Anderson. Please welcome Dr. Marty Anderson.
Thank you so much. Sawadee-ka. Welcome everybody. Good to see you all here and afar. I'm delighted to be back with you again today. As Ajahn Naraporn said, this is the second session in the second part of the series. Those of you who participated in the fall before the flooding experienced unlocking learners' potential, and this series is about learners' voices. And we discussed last time how important it is for our students to begin to feel that they can express themselves, that they can have opinions and ideas and express them not only in Thai language but in English also, as that gives them access to all kinds of other people and other opportunities. So that's what we're working on today. But we're going to start looking back at writing, because we ran out of time a little bit last time. I had planned too much. It's a mistake we always make as teachers, to have too many things planned and we cannot get to them all. But let's look at what we did last time, and then we're going to do some work with writing. So last time we looked at written opinion, what it means when our students write down something that's trying to express something they feel strongly about. And we looked at it sort of through two different lenses. One was the lens of the op-ed, or the opinion editorial, which is a common feature of newspapers. And we read a few of them. We read a couple that came out during the time of the flooding in Thailand. And then we read one that was from the flooding in Vermont in USA. Then we looked at This I Believe, which is a format that you've encountered before in our sessions. It's a very popular series on public radio and also written down in the United States. And these are personal expressions of what people think is important in life. And you'll have all kinds of things that are expressed. We read one from an author, Isabel Allende, who talked about the importance of giving and how after she lost her daughter to a tragic early death, she became very consumed with the idea that giving was much better than receiving, and that became like something that would guide her life going forward. Then we looked at two ways of planning a persuasive essay. You received a copy of an essay planner that's very detailed, kind of goes step by step by step, indicating you're going to take this item first, then write this sentence and this one. I don't know if you've had a chance to try it with your students, but I encourage you to try, especially if your students are at a slightly more advanced level. It's interesting to try. And the best way is to try yourself. Try to write an essay using that planner, and then see if you can incorporate it with your students. We also just did a very simple model of folding a piece of paper and finding the 4 squares, and then putting your idea in the middle, and then saying, okay, what will go in the first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, conclusion. So a very simple pattern that you might be able to use with your students for planning. The final thing, and I realize there might have been a little confusion about this, and that's because I wasn't clear, and I also didn't put it on the PowerPoint, so I apologize for that. But the assignment from session 1 is only due for session 4. And that will be the first time that Ajahn Shea will be here with you. And the assignment will be a sample of student writing. So something from one of your students that you think is a good example of persuasion. And you must send this to Shea at the email address that's provided there, hopefully no later than the 13th of February. And that will give her a few days. She will not be able to work with all of the writing, obviously. She will probably pick, depending on how much time she feels, she probably will pick maybe 3 or 4 samples. So that's what happened on session 1, and that's what's due for session number 4, which will be just about 1 month from now. Perhaps do you want to do a little summary? Thank you.
Thank you อาจารย์มาทีค่ะอาจารย์ก็ทบทวนนะคะในเซสชันแรกที่เราเรียนกันไปนะคะก็เน้นเรื่อง Written Opinion นะคะซึ่งอาจารย์ได้นำเสนอตัวอย่างนะคะการเขียนแสดงความคิดเห็นจากที่เรียกว่าเป็น Opinion Editorial นะคะการแสดงความคิดเห็นอย่างเช่นในบทบรรณาธิการนะคะซึ่งในเรื่องที่อาจารย์นำมาให้ดูเป็นตัวอย่างก็เรื่องที่เหตุการณ์ของเราที่เพิ่งผ่านไปคือน้ำท่วมในประเทศไทยนะคะแล้วก็อาจารย์ก็นำอีกเรื่องหนึ่งที่เป็นงานเขียนนะคะเช่นกันเนี่ยมาเปรียบเทียบให้ดูก็คือเป็นประสบการณ์ของผู้ที่ประสบภัยนะคะภัยพิบัติเช่นกันที่เวอร์มอนต์นะคะที่บ้านที่เมืองที่อาจารย์อยู่นะคะแล้วก็อีกอันนึงที่นำมาให้ดูก็คือในหัวข้อ This I Believe นะคะซึ่งอันนี้เป็นงานเขียนซึ่งใครๆจะเข้าไปเขียนก็ได้นะคะเป็นงานเขียนสั้นๆอาจารย์ก็มาให้ดูเป็นตัวอย่างด้วยนะคะซึ่งตรงนี้เนี่ยอาจารย์ก็เชิญชวนว่าเราน่าจะลองสนับสนุนให้นักเรียนของเราเนี่ยลองเข้าไปเขียนดูด้วยนะคะต่อไปอาจารย์ก็นำเสนอ Essay Planner นะคะก็มีทั้งที่เป็นเข้าโครงว่าควรจะมี thesis คือ main idea นะคะมี supporting details อะไรพวกนั้นนะคะให้เขียนตามนั้นหรือว่าเป็นผังแบบง่ายๆที่เรียกว่าfour square paper นะคะคือพับกระดาษเป็น4ช่องนะคะแล้วก็ให้เขียนนะคะลองเขียนดูช่องแรกนะคะจะเป็น introduction ช่องที่2เป็นอะไรนะคะแล้วก็ช่องสุดท้ายก็เป็น conclusion อย่างนี้เป็นต้นอันนั้นก็อาจารย์ก็บอกว่าเป็นตารางเป็นโครงร่างการเขียนงานแบบง่ายๆนะคะซึ่งตรงนี้ทั้ง2แบบนี้นะคะอาจารย์บอกว่าเราเนี่ยในฐานะครูผู้สอนเนี่ยควรจะลองเขียนเองก่อนจะได้รู้ว่าจะเขียนได้ไหมง่ายยากเกินไปสำหรับนักเรียนของเราไหมนะคะแล้วก็ถึงจะไปให้นักเรียนลองเขียนดูสุดท้ายอาจารย์ก็พูดถึงงานเขียนกันบ้านนะคะซึ่งอยากจะให้เราไม่ใช่ให้ตัวอาจารย์เขียนเองนะคะให้อาจารย์เนี่ยไปให้นักเรียนของอาจารย์เนี่ยเขียนอาจารย์สอนงานเขียนอยู่แล้วนะคะให้นักเรียนของอาจารย์เนี่ยเขียนแล้วก็ส่งงานเขียนของนักเรียนเนี่ยค่ะเข้ามาที่อีเมล address ของอาจารย์เชนะคะอาจารย์เชจะเริ่มสอนตั้งแต่เซสชันที่4 5 6สำหรับassignment ของเซสชันที่1คราวที่แล้วเนี่ยส่งมาเพื่อที่อาจารย์เชจะได้นำมาคุยกันนะคะในเซสชันที่4ของอาจารย์นะคะเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยอยากให้ส่งภายในวันที่13กุมภานะคะเป็นงานเขียนของนักเรียนของอาจารย์นะคะไม่ใช่งานเขียนของตัวอาจารย์นะคะค่ะก็ขอเชิญชวนให้ทุกท่านนะคะส่งมานะคะเราจะได้นำมาดูกันนะคะเป็นตัวอย่างค่ะ
Okay, thank you. So today we're going to be looking at, first of all, going back to writing just a little bit because we ran out of time and we really didn't get to do anything with the rubric. So can I have the PowerPoint up again, please, so I can talk through today? Thank you. Here we go. So we're going to look at the writing rubric again and actually look at it with some actual samples of writing. These came from Ajahn Shea's class, and she found some samples of persuasion. So we're going to actually look at those. You'll be working with the partner that you're sitting with at your table, which is true here in Bangkok. If in Chiang Mai or Hua Hin you're not sitting with a partner, please move yourself around so you're set up that way, because most of your activities today will be, you'll be working with one other person. So we're going to actually try to practice with a piece of writing and using a rubric to see how that works for you. And we'll be talking about whether or not the rubric is too complicated or too easy or whatever the case may be. And actually, just to predict, at our next session in 2 weeks, we will be looking at actually creating a rubric and doing that together. So you can make one that's appropriate for your students. And then we're going to look at spoken persuasion and how it's different. When we try to convince people through our words in speaking, how is that? And we're going to see some examples of spoken persuasion that I found on YouTube. And then we're going to try to assess those. And just like there was an assignment from session 1, due for session 4, from this session, the assignment will be due on the 5th session. And we'll explain what that is. Maybe just do a quick summary of that as
ค่ะ
well.
สำหรับเซสชันที่ 2 วันนี้นะคะอาจารย์มาชีก็จะนำ writing rubric นะคะคือแบบประเมินเกณฑ์ประเมินงานเขียนของเด็กซึ่งอาจารย์แจกไปเมื่อท้ายชั่วโมงคราวที่แล้วนี่นะคะเอามาดูกันอีกทีหนึ่งนะคะพูดคุยในรายละเอียดแล้วก็จะนำตัวอย่างงานเขียนของนักเรียนนะคะของนักศึกษาของอาจารย์เชเนี่ยมาลองประเมินกันโดยใช้ writing rubric อันนี้นะคะแล้วต่อไปอาจารย์ก็จะแนะนำถึงการงานพูดนะคะ spoken persuasion แล้วก็แนะนำเป็นspeaking rubric ด้วยนะคะการแบบประเมินงานพูดนะคะแล้วก็การบ้านของวันนี้นะคะก็จะเป็นงานที่จะต้องส่งให้อาจารย์เชภายในวันที่ 2 มีนาเพื่อที่จะนำเสนอกันในวันเซสชันที่ 5 นะคะค่ะ
Okay, so let's go right into it. If you look in your packet for today, if you didn't bring back the writing rubric from last time, there's another one in your packet because they have included it again. So you want to find your rubric, and it has a number of categories down the left-hand side, and it also has a rating scale across the top. And basically, what you're going to be doing is giving people scores. So you're going to read some actual student papers, and you're going to start, first of all, with the one that has the title about one laptop per child. If you look in your packet, you also have a piece of writing that talks about one laptop per child. This author, who's a university student in Thailand, has an opinion about this one laptop per child. And so what I'd like you to do is work with your partner, and I would go paragraph by paragraph, really read a paragraph and then chat with one another, then read another paragraph, chat with one another. Because we're also on television, we don't want to leave too much time where there's not conversation. So try to move through quickly. Try to use your quick reading skills, your skimming skills, and just look at the rubric and begin to assess what kind of score would you give this piece of writing. Again, if this were your actual student, you probably would take a long time to try to assess the writing. But you're just trying to quickly practice with the rubric now. So go ahead, take the writing on one laptop, take the rubric, and see what kind of score you come up with. We'll be starting today in Bangkok. I'll ask a couple of groups to tell me what your score is and why. You have to give some reasons. You can't just say, we gave it 16. You have to tell me why you gave it 16 and not a higher score, or why it's 16 and not a lower score. And then we'll also hear from, I think we'll go up to Chiang Mai first, and we'll hear from 2 sites then on the score that you gave. All right, go ahead and set to work.
ค่ะสำหรับงานชิ้นแรกที่เราจะต้องช่วยกันทำนะคะกิจกรรมแรกก็คือว่าดูที่รูบริกนะคะ writing rubric แล้วก็มีตัวอย่างงานเขียนนะคะหัวข้อชื่อว่า one laptop per child นะคะซึ่งอันนี้เนี่ยขอภาพขอ documentation rubric ก่อนได้ไหมคะอาจารย์ดูที่หัวข้อนะคะเป็นหลักดูหัวข้อทางซ้ายมือซึ่งเป็นตัวเข้มๆนะคะแล้วก็ภาพขึ้นหรือยังคะ documentation นะคะ หัวข้อใน writing rubric นะคะอันแรกก็คือหัวข้อว่า responded to the assignment นะคะก็คือว่าสอดคล้องกับinstruction ไหมกับที่สั่งไหมว่าให้เขียนอะไรนะคะแล้วก็หัวข้อที่2คือ clarity นะคะคือความชัดเจนนะคะหัวข้อที่3 persuasiveness คือว่าซูมเข้าไปทางช่องซ้ายก่อนได้ไหมคะตัดช่องขวาสุดไปก่อนก็ได้ค่ะเอาหัวข้อเอาไว้นะคะpersuasiveness ก็คือว่าที่เขาเขียนเนี่ยน่าหมายความว่าเราเชื่อไหมนะคะเราเห็นคล้อยตามไหมแล้วก็ audience นะคะคือว่าทำให้ผู้อ่านเนี่ยน่าจะเข้าใจน่าจะ aware นะคะเมื่ออ่านงานเขียนชิ้นนี้ไหมนะคะ organization การเรียงลำดับเหตุการณ์เป็นอย่างไร coherence ด้วยนะคะการสอดร้อยเนื้อความเข้าหากันนะคะอาจารย์ดูเป็นหลักๆนะคะแล้วก็ลองให้คะแนนดูนะคะว่างานเขียนชิ้นนี้ควรจะได้ประมาณเท่าไหร่นะคะงานเขียนก็ one laptop per child นะคะค่ะเดี๋ยวลองเอางานเขียนขึ้นมาให้ดูสักนิดหนึ่งนะคะจะได้เห็นว่าลักษณะเป็นอย่างไรค่ะ
everybody. As I said, I know we had to move quickly, and I apologize for that. Is anybody ready to just throw out a score and tell us why you want to give that score? Anybody in Bangkok willing to tell me a possible score? Please. We always need somebody to be brave. Over here, are you ready, ladies? Thank you so much. Let's hear from one or two people in Bangkok, and then we'll see what you think in Chiang Mai. Go ahead. What do you think?
With my partner, I think that this topic is quite responsive to readers. So I get the point for the first part. And for clarity, just only 3, because strong but not something that not clear in some point. And for persuasiveness, I think reader can think along after reading, and audience.
So what did you give for persuasiveness?
4.
4 also, okay.
4. We think along.
Right.
Good or bad or something like that.
Okay.
And audience. I think reader less awareness, something like that. That is, okay, use a lot of money for buying something like it. And it may be technology, so maybe it's important for students. And
So that was
organization.
also 3, okay.
For just only 3 for audience.
Okay.
And organization, it's okay that introduction ask reader about good or bad, and then say something that the writer disagree to use budget, lots of budget for this, and at the end try to give some idea that you can use internet high speed instead of this, but organization at the ending maybe it's not quite clear. So just only 3.
Okay.
2 or 3? 2.
For organization.
And the last one is 2.
Okay. And why is the last one 2?
Coherent.
Yeah. Just not, you didn't feel like it held together strongly. Okay. Okay, that's great. So that would give this person a total of 19 out of 24. Okay. Does anybody in Bangkok have a very different way of scoring? Did somebody give a higher score or a lower one? Or about the same? About the same. Okay. Let's touch base with Chiang Mai. What kind of scores did you give, or if you have any other rationale, can we hear from you?
By sitting.
เชียงใหม่เชิญค่ะ
Well, I think I'm a little bit more lenient than the Bangkok teachers. I gave an overall score of 19. On the first one, it's responding to the assignment, I gave the student a 4. And I did this for a couple of reasons. I thought a few things were weak, but I thought that the student made a good effort. And I have found as a teacher, if I can encourage the students and give them some positive feedback, that they will continue to try and to improve and to do better, but they're easily discouraged in English. So I'm a little, as a teacher who's been here a long time, I think maybe I'm a little bit more lenient. As far as clarity, I think that I gave the student a 3. I thought they did a fairly good job of presenting their argument. I think it's difficult to give a student a 4 because their statement can be strong in many ways, but it's not always clear because of their use of language. They make the small mistakes that they make. I think that for persuasiveness, I gave the student a 3, and I did it because I believe what the writer was saying. I believe that he believes that too, and I think that he presents his points well. I think that sometimes he could have been a little bit more complete in giving some examples, particularly when he was trying to talk about the things that he didn't agree with. And that brings me to the audience part. The audience part, I gave him a 3 there, but he didn't counter. He didn't give counter ideas very effectively, so I couldn't give him a 4. The organization, I thought he organized it fairly well. I thought his introduction could have been stronger with a stronger thesis statement. Instead of just the question at the end, he could have added more to it to talk about what he's going to address and how he's going to organize his essay. And I thought he had a very weak one-sentence conclusion that could have been strengthened a lot, so I only gave him a 3 there. But as far as coherence, it was easy to read and follow his train of thought and what he was thinking. So my overall score for the student was a 19.
Also, okay, great. Thank you so much for being. So you had was that a 4 again here, or what was that? Under coherence?
So, on the coherence, I gave him 3s on everything except the first one, responding to assignment. That's the only 4 I gave.
Okay,
I think it's
great.
very difficult to give a student a 4 on all of these unless they're students at the university level and even perhaps a graduate level that have much stronger English skills and don't make some of the simple mistakes in vocabulary and grammar and structure that this student made.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Very helpful to hear your rationale. And isn't it interesting, though, to just even have a chance to talk about a piece of writing? I had as the next slide my thoughts, and I don't feel like I've got anything that is particularly important to add, except that I would reinforce what our colleagues said in both Bangkok and Chiang Mai, that overall I felt persuaded. We were just discussing here together at the front, what did we think about this person's argument? Do we think that they're making a good point? Sure, it was not written in absolutely perfect English, but it was very understandable, it was very clear, and I certainly came away thinking, no, I think that laptops in grade 1 is a waste. It's not a good idea. I am persuaded by this writer's opinion, and that's obviously the whole point. I think I'll let Ajahn Naraporn do a little summary of those conversations, and then we'll go on.
ค่ะสำหรับที่ทางกรุงเทพนะคะท่านอาจารย์ที่กรุงเทพและท่านอาจารย์ที่เชียงใหม่นะคะได้พูดมาก็รู้สึกจะมีความเห็นใกล้เคียงกันนะคะในส่วนที่ว่างานเขียนชิ้นนี้เนี่ยก็ตอบโจทย์นะคะของงานที่ได้รับมอบหมายให้เขียนนะคะและในส่วนของหัวข้ออย่างเช่นความชัดเจนนะคะของไอเดียที่นำเสนอหรือว่าการผู้ที่อ่านนะคะว่าเป้าหมายผู้อ่านนี้เป็นใครหรือว่าการเรียงลำดับเนื้อความเนี่ยก็ทั้งสองท่านก็เห็นตรงกันนะคะว่ามีความชัดเจนนะคะแล้วก็เรียงลำดับได้เนื้อความได้ดีทีเดียวนะคะเพียงแต่ในเรื่องการทำให้มีความเชื่อตามนั้นนะคะก็ทางเชียงใหม่ก็บอกว่ายังไม่ค่อยหนักแน่นเท่าไหร่น่าจะมีการยกตัวอย่างเพิ่มเติมนะคะแล้วก็แต่ว่าในส่วนของการสอดร้อยเนื้อหาเขาด้วยกันเนี่ยทางเชียงใหม่ก็ให้คะแนนมากกว่าทางกรุงเทพนะคะบอกว่ามีการเรียงร้อยเนื้อความได้อย่างชัดเจนเป็นขั้นเป็นตอนนะคะค่ะซึ่งอาจารย์มาตี้ก็เห็นด้วยนะครับอาจารย์ก็คิดว่าน่าจะได้คะแนนสูงทีเดียวสำหรับการเขียนเพื่อที่จะชักชวนนะคะให้เห็นตามค่ะ
Okay, so because it takes some time to get used to rubrics in order to be able to eventually create or critique one, we're going to use another piece of writing and do this activity again. You have in your packet actually 3 examples of writing. It'd be great if you want to have a new partner. If you'd rather just stay put because you're feeling tired, I don't mind. But we're not going to do the second rating in your packet, which is called the single gender education. We're going to skip that one for now because it's a longer reading and it takes more time to go through it. But you might think about practicing at home with the rubric, with that assignment, and see what you think. We're going to go to the third reading, which is called Economic Infrastructure. And you're going to work with the partner and try to rate this reading as well. I just wanted to point out something in your packets, at least here in Bangkok. Pages on the PowerPoint handout, pages 2 and 3 are missing, but they're coming. Okay, they're coming soon. So I don't know if it's the same is true in other locations, but in Bangkok we were missing 2 pages of the PowerPoint. So go ahead and work with your partner on the reading called Economic Infrastructure. As before, we're just going to take a few minutes, so try to go quickly. Thank you.
สำหรับงานกิจกรรมชิ้นที่2นะคะก็ลองประเมินงานเขียนอีกชิ้นหนึ่งนะคะในหัวข้อชื่อ Economic Infrastructure นะคะซึ่งก็เขียนค่อนข้างจะสั้นนิดหนึ่งนะคะค่ะขอภาพบน Documentation ด้วยค่ะแล้วก็ใช้รูบริกเดิมนะคะอาจารย์ลองใช้เวลาอีกทีนะคะนี่ชิ้นที่2อาจจะรวดเร็วขึ้นนะคะแล้วก็อย่างที่เรียนคือดูภาพรวมๆนะคะจากหัวข้อการประเมินอย่างกว้างๆนะคะอาจารย์มาที่ให้ข้อสังเกตไว้นิดนึงว่าแบบประเมินอันนี้เนี่ยไม่ได้เน้นเรื่องไวยากรณ์เท่าไหร่นะคะซึ่งเราอาจจะไปเติมได้นะคะแต่ฉันก็มองว่าถ้า coherence เนี่ยได้คะแนนสูงก็แปลว่าอย่างน้อยเขาก็ต่อเนื้อหาได้สอดคล้องแล้วนะคะแม้ว่าภาษาการใช้ไวยากรณ์อาจจะไม่สมบูรณ์นักนะคะซึ่งตรงนั้นอาจารย์ก็อาจจะไปเติมอีกสักหัวข้อหนึ่งได้ค่ะค่ะแล้วก็เราจะเริ่มที่เชียงใหม่ก่อนนะคะขอฟีดแบ็กจากเชียงใหม่แล้วก็หัวหินนะคะคราวนี้นะคะค่ะแล้วก็ถึงจะมากรุงเทพค่ะ
Again, I know this has been quick, and I know that if you were giving your students a real grade on this paper, you would spend much more time than we're spending. But let's go to Chiang Mai and first hear from them, and then we will go to Hua Hin and hear what they have to say. So let's start with Chiang Mai. I'm going to keep score over here. I guess I don't need that. What do you think?
We're coming.
Okay.
Start off for the response. I couldn't really decide between a 3 or 4. It's difficult to judge how effective they were since we don't actually know the original assignments.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
Right off, the student gave a good, like, here's the thesis to this. So,
So you ended up giving it what score?
Well, we couldn't really decide. I think
You couldn't decide. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to just leave that one like that. Okay.
I gave this 3 for clarity, though we have another teacher in here who gave it 2. The language used
Okay.
Myself gave a 3 for persuasiveness. It doesn't definitely their thesis using examples. They cite statistics, which I think is good. Nice.
Okay.
And also give a 3 for audience. At some point, let's see. prefer to use their own private transportation. The students presenting a counter argument, sort of counter example taking, aware that some, like, the reason preference alternative private transportation. For organization and coherence, I gave 2s. One of those lacking necessary to be organized differently and present sort of a stronger front, whereas the writer seems to be going back and forth and on the same topic, but not very well streamlined, and so they skip around to a bunch of different subtopics. And yeah, generally I think this essay was pretty persuasive, but I sort of finished reading and I was like, ooh, I was expecting a little bit more, something of a wrap up.
Okay. So the math is either a 2, 4, 6, 12, so between 17 and 18.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm just going to do a real quick summary. For some reason, your microphone there was cutting out as you were talking, so it was a little bit hard. What is it? Did I miss that? I'm not good at math. Anyway, because you cut out, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of your comments for people who maybe couldn't hear very well. One is you pointed at the use of providing a counter argument. So this person did take the option of doing that to say, well, yes, we should be promoting public transportation, but perhaps people want to take their own cars. They don't want to ride with other people they don't know, etc. So taking into account the audience is one of the things that she mentioned. And also at the end, our colleague in Chiang Mai said she just expected more. The essay went along and it was coming together in certain ways, but it kind of didn't end up in a strong way so that she would really say, yes, I really, really believe in what this person is saying. All right, so let's hear from Hui Hin. What kind of scores did somebody there offer?
Hello, it's Marty.
Hi.
Hi. So you can hear me clearly, right?
That's pretty good, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this score for responded to the assignment, we gave the writer 3 scores. Because I think it respond to the assignment about encourage people to use mass public transportation instead of using their own cars. For clarity, we gave them 3 because they have a lot of supporting detail to support that using mass public transportation is better than using their car. And how about persuasiveness? For me, I gave him 4 because it's quite strong and effective because he agreed to use a public transport because a lot of advantages and to save money, save gasoline, and also save environment, something like that. And for the audience, I'm sorry, it's Marty. I'm quite confused. For responded to the assignment, I gave 3. For clarity, I gave 3. Okay. And for persuasiveness, I give only 2.
Okay.
Right. For the audience, I give 3 because it reflects us to awareness about the environment or something like that, and about our money for using my car. And for organization, I give just only 2 because it's quite confusing in my opinion, because the writer repeat their opinion again and again in a different paragraph. I think that some paragraph they can conclude it together to make it more clear, something like that. And the last one is coherent. I gave him only 2. Even they have connection word however, they have conclusion word on the culturally, but anyway it's still confusing. So I gave
Yeah.
15 out of 24, in my opinion.
Yeah. Great. Thank you
you.
so much. Yes, fair enough. I just have a note here that Ajahn Narapan is reminding me that we're not entirely sure who the audience is. And so that is the difficult thing to assess on. Typically, when you give a writing assignment, you say you're going to write this for the Ministry of Transport, or you're going to write this for an opinion piece in the Bangkok Post, or you're going to write this for your own personal blog. Fair enough that that's unclear. What I was interested in pointing out in looking at the scores is how close they were in both writing samples. And this typically gives you a good feeling that the rubric you're using might be an effective rubric. If you find that, and when you're creating your own rubrics, you may want to do this kind of activity with a colleague and to test it. Because if you come up with a similar score, then perhaps your rubric is more reliable than if one person gives it a 20 and the other person gives it 12 or something. So it's an interesting way to test. I'm going to go ahead and let you do a little summary of that before we move on.
This time is my turn to help อาจารย์นะครับ
Okay, thank you.
ค่ะคราวนี้เรามาดูกันนะคะระหว่างชุดที่2ที่เป็นเรื่องของ economic infrastructure ระหว่างอาจารย์จากเชียงใหม่และหัวหินที่ช่วยเกรดนะคะก็พบว่าในภาพรวมทั้งสองท่านให้เหมือนกันนะครับประมาณที่15ซึ่งอาจารย์มาร์ตี้บอกว่าน่าสนใจมากเนื่องจากว่าการที่คะแนนเท่ากันนี่ก็แสดงว่าส่วนที่เป็นของรูบริกเนี่ยอาจจะมีเกณฑ์ที่น่าจะชัดเจนพอสมควรที่ผู้ที่เกรดเนี่ยคิดคล้ายๆกันและสิ่งอันนี้จะทำให้เรามานั่งพิจารณาดูว่าเวลาเราจะให้รูบริกทำรูบริกเสร็จแล้วถ้าจะให้คิดว่าการให้คะแนนเด็กยุติธรรมครูก็ควรจะให้เพื่อนลองทำดูลองช่วยกันให้คะแนนถ้าเด็กได้มาถ้าหากว่า2ท่านที่เป็นผู้เกรดได้คะแนนคล้ายกันก็เรียกว่าตัวรูบริกนี้น่าจะเป็นรูบริกที่ชัดเจนและยุติธรรมกับผู้ที่เขียนนะคะอีก point นึงที่เรสขึ้นมาและคิดว่าน่าจะเป็นเรื่องที่ครูทุกคนควรจะพิจารณาคือเรื่องของ audience นะคะในที่นี้เราจะพบว่าไม่ได้ชัดเจนว่า audience คือใครว่าใครจะเป็นผู้อ่านอาจจะเป็นเจ้าหน้าที่จากกระทรวงกลุ่มเป้าหมายอาจจะเป็นตัวเพื่อนหรือว่าตัวอาจารย์ผู้ตรวจเองโดยตัวเองนะคะดิฉันคิดว่าตรงนี้สำคัญมากเพราะว่าครูควรจะต้อง aware เรื่องว่าเราจะต้องให้เด็กชัดเจนว่า audience คือใครเพราะฉะนั้นเวลาให้งานเด็กถ้าเป็นไปได้น่าจะมีการตกลงด้วยให้บริบทชัดเจนว่ากลุ่มเป้าหมายที่เราเขียนถึงคือใครเพราะว่ามีผลต่อการใช้คำการใช้สำนวนและการให้ข้อมูลหรือเหตุผลสำหรับผู้อ่านที่เป็นกลุ่มเป้าหมายนะคะถ้าเรื่องนี้เป็นกลุ่มเป้าหมายสำหรับเจ้าหน้าที่ของรัฐก็น่าจะเป็นอีกแนวหนึ่งกับบุคคลทั่วไปนะคะตัวเลขสถิติที่เข้ามาเนี่ยน่าจะชัดเจนถ้าสำหรับเจ้าหน้าที่แต่บุคคลทั่วไปเรื่องความสะดวกสบายเรื่องของค่าใช้จ่ายที่เขาจะต้องจ่ายออกไปจากกระเป๋าเขาน่าจะมีผลมากกว่าค่าใช้จ่ายระดับประเทศที่ก็ต้องมองไกลนะคะอันนี้อยากฝากครูให้นำเอามาพิจารณาว่าจะต้องสร้างบริบทหรือบอกให้ชัดเจนนะคะก็คงจะเป็นส่วนนี้ส่วนที่เหลือก็คงคล้ายๆกันนะคะ2ท่านคะแนนพอกันคือ organization และ coherence ค่ะ
Okay, thank you. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just would like to mention that what Ajahn Cheriusi what has just said, that the audience, the teachers should make it clear to the students what the audience would be, who will be reading the assignment, the tasks. Well, I don't know if you know, but that depends on the topic that we give the students as well, right? If the topic is something about economic infrastructure, the audience, we should imagine that the audience would be the authorities the persons involved, not only the teacher who is grading the paper. Am I right?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Okay, on the next slide,
Excuse me, Marty.
Yes.
This is Jack in Chiang Mai. Before you go on to your next item, I'd like to make one comment that I have found over the years with teaching writing in Thailand. I have found that if we, as teachers, if we do not put a limit on the number of words in a sentence, that it's very easy for ESL students or learners to lose their train of thought. And so I have a policy that at the high school level, I do not allow students to write a sentence with more than 20 words. That way it helps to keep them focused with what they're trying to say in that sentence and convey the idea. Also, because in Thai there's no punctuation marks, so it's not uncommon to find students writing a sentence that has 60 or 70 words in it. And that becomes very confusing. I mean, the writer has lost their train of thought, the reader has lost the train of thought, and in this last example, the economic infrastructure, I counted 5 sentences that had 32 words or more. And while this is a higher level of writing than what we will find probably in most of our classrooms, I find that depending on the grade level, if you're talking about Patome level, then you need to limit it to maybe not more than 10, 12 words in a sentence. High school level, I find 20 is pretty much the max. So that may be something that we want to talk about as we talk about clarity of thought. It also helps students then to focus on that one sentence and try to identify, are my tenses correct? Because that's where many Thai students get confused as they're writing. The tenses are incorrect, and it's very difficult then to follow the train of thinking of the writer.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that comment. I was thinking about how, as a native speaker of English, if I wrote a sentence that had 30 or 40 or 50 words, I would get lost in my own thought. And so, yeah, that's a very important point to make. And actually, as we move forward, when we come to our third session, we will be creating some rubrics together. We might want to include something like, numbers of words. I mean, that might become then part of the rubric. It'd be part of the assessment, which would make it very clear to students what they need to be doing to try to keep their writing clear. Thank you. Go ahead.
ค่ะอาจารย์แจ็คจากที่เชียงใหม่นะคะก็ได้แนะนำนะคะในฐานะที่ก็ได้สอนการทักษะการเขียนด้วยนะคะว่าอย่างหนึ่งที่ควรจะควบคุมนะคะควรจะบอกนักเรียนของเราตั้งแต่แรกก็คือว่าจำนวนคำในประโยคนะคะเพราะว่าภาษาไทยนักเรียนของเราเนี่ยมักจะชินกับการเขียนภาษาไทยซึ่งภาษาไทยเราเนี่ยไม่มี punctuation ไม่มีเว้นวรรคตอนด้วยนะคะเพราะนั้นก็เขียนไปเรื่อยๆในภาษาอังกฤษทำให้ในประโยคนึงได้มีคำเยอะแยะมากเลยนะคะแล้วก็ทำให้การสื่อความเนี่ยนะคะไม่ดีเท่าที่ควรนะคะแล้วก็ไวยากรณ์ก็ไม่ถูกต้องนะคะเพราะว่าประโยคนี้อาจจะมีกริยาเยอะแยะมีประธานอยู่ตัวเดียวตรงหัวประโยคเท่านั้นนะคะต่อกันไปเรื่อยๆเพราะนั้นก็น่าจะกำหนดอย่างเช่นว่าอาจารย์ก็แนะนำว่าอย่างเช่นว่าประโยคนึงไม่ควรจะเกิน20 คำนะคะอย่างนี้เป็นต้นก็จะเป็นการให้นักเรียนเนี่ยใช้วางแนวคิดเขียนให้กระชับนะคะแล้วก็ให้ถูกต้องมากขึ้นค่ะ
All right, thanks. I was just going to talk briefly about the next slide rather than actually having a discussion about it because I want to move on now to spoken persuasion. But this is consider this perhaps a reflection question for you. Think about it on your own time. Think about it on your long trip back home for those of you who came from a distance to come here. How are rubrics helpful? How could you develop your own? What would the process be? And I've decided that we're actually going to do that next time, as I've already predicted. And how could the rubric that you've just seen be simplified? For persuasive speech, you're going to see a simpler rubric in that it's got less descriptors in it. But does that necessarily make it better, or does that make it harder to use? So that's a question for us to think about. So now we're transferring over to speaking. And one of the things to think about is what is different about writing and speaking? And how does persuasion or personal opinion sound when it's spoken? But what's the difference? Let's bring this question back to Bangkok. You guys have been able to be sort of relaxed here for a little while. So I'd like to hear from you. What's different about writing and speaking when it comes to persuading people? What can you think of that makes a difference between the two? What do you think, Bangkok? Go ahead, please. Go ahead and you have to punch the microphone. Thank you. Thank you so much. There you go.
Focus on the difference about writing and speaking.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, I think speaking is maybe when we speak, we don't think much or care much about the grammar.
Oh.
That's so the word choice or the diction is very important in the state of speaking. But when writing, we have to focus mainly on the sentence pattern, just to make the writing clear or not about the coherence. That's all.
Okay, so this is an interesting point, is that oftentimes when you're speaking, if you haven't planned, we're going to see a couple of examples of speeches that people planned. And then hopefully they did practice and think about the grammar. But you're right, speaking is much more sort of spontaneous. Even if we plan a speech, if we're a famous politician, we maybe think very carefully about what we're going to say, or in a speech class. But in general, speaking can feel more spontaneous, maybe less correct. There's also the truth that spoken word is less permanent. When you write it down, I was kind of chuckling as I walked around watching you try to grade the writing, how the teacher in all of us, we're all teachers here, are underlining and circling and finding errors and, because that's what we tend to do with writing. With the spoken word, it's less permanent unless we have a recording of it and we actually go back and review it, which we will do. Anything else comes to mind? Think about this last bullet here. What are some clues, and anybody can chime in from any of our three sites, what are some clues that someone is trying to persuade you about something when they're talking? If they're speaking, how do you know that they're trying to convince you of their opinion? Anybody?
Sending it, gestures, the look on your face, a raised eyebrow, a cock of your head. I mean, it lends a lot of force to what you're saying, and it tells the audience that you either think it's important or that you think it's pure bull.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, he's talking about the things that accompany speaking. So when you're watching me talk, people make fun of me because I gesture a lot. I use my hands, I wave them around. But that's a tool that speakers can use. You'll see, again, if I think about political speakers, I think about powerful American politicians and how the ones that are very effective might have some gesture that really indicates that now, believe me. Or as our friend is commenting, even the way you use your face, expressions you might make. So these are things that are part of being persuaded. Certainly is how people react. I'll let you make a comment on that.
ค่ะสำหรับเราจะดูเรื่องการพูดต่อไปนะคะทีนี้ในเรื่องการพูดเนี่ยอาจารย์มาที่คำถามแรกก็ถามว่ามีความแตกต่างยังไงนะคะการพูดชักชวนกับการเขียนนะคะซึ่งท่านอาจารย์ทางกรุงเทพก็บอกว่าการพูดเนี่ยมันเกิดขึ้นมาโดยปัจจุบันทันด่วนใช่ไหมคะเพราะฉะนั้นก็จะเรื่องความถูกต้องนะคะของกราฟมาของไวยากรณ์เนี่ยก็จะลดน้อยลงนะคะแล้วก็ซึ่งอาจารย์ตรงนี้อาจารย์มาตี้ก็บอกว่าเห็นด้วยนะคะเพราะว่าภาษาพูดเนี่ยมักจะเป็นภาษาซึ่งมีความ permanent นะคะเป็นคงที่เนี่ยน้อยกว่านะคะเพราะว่าฟังแล้วก็ผ่านหูไปใช่ไหมคะเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยก็ความถูกต้องความอะไรก็อาจจะลดน้อยลงแล้วก็อาจารย์ก็คำถามที่สองว่าแล้วเราจะทราบได้ไงว่าผู้พูดเนี่ยเขาพยายามที่จะให้เราคล้อยตามให้เราเชื่อตามที่เขาพูดนะคะทางท่านอาจารย์นะคะจากเชียงใหม่นะคะท่านอาจารย์ก็บอกว่าอาจจะด้วยการใช้ท่าทางนะคะใช้สีหน้านะคะประกอบนะคะซึ่งตรงนี้อาจารย์มาตี้ก็บอกว่าก็เป็นส่วนหนึ่งนะคะที่ใช้ประกอบคำพูดค่ะAnother point I'd like to add in order to for a speaker to convince the audience is to use the repetition of words. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the repetition of picking the powerful word. If you remember the writing from last time where the author said, "We were lucky," and she kept saying, "We were lucky," even though she was writing. So I think in both written and oral speech, repetition is very, very important. Thank you for that addition. One thing, sorry, I'm just trying to move to the next slide here. A very important word and a clue that your people are trying to persuade you is the word because. Because gives you the sense of cause and effect. Here's my feeling about this thing because. Gives you, it's how you connect to the rationale and the reasons for believing that. And you'll see persuasive speakers use that word quite effectively. They don't just say, "Believe me, I'm right." So, I'm right because here are the facts, here's an example. Many of the things that we saw in writing do apply to speaking, but it takes a different form, and we're going to see that in just a moment. So first of all, while I'm chatting, I would like you please back there in the booth to load the first video on Thai food. This was taken from YouTube, and while we're getting that loaded, we're going to watch this video clip twice. The first time, you're just going to watch it. You can jot down some notes. You'll chat with a partner. The second time you watch it, we'll use the rubric, but we'll talk about that in between times. So you're going to get to see this first one 2 times. I think it's about 3 or 4 minutes long. Okay, it's so again, it's from YouTube, and as soon as we have it loaded, you can go ahead and play it for people. Thank you.